Hey everybody, welcome to another tutorial video here at tylerduprey.com. Today we're going to be building a blog featured article card. And so this is a common element that you see on a blog site where you go to the home page or to the blog page and you have a list or a grid of articles, and each article is inside of a well-designed card that gives you a quick summary of the article, maybe a featured image, maybe some interesting information about when the article was published or the author of the article, and then it'll give you a link or a button where you can click through and read the whole article if you choose to do so. So that's what we're going to be creating today. It's going to cause us to get into the nitty-gritty of CSS positioning, and so it's not going to be like the CSS layout stuff that we're a little bit more used to. This is going to be a lot more tedious and kind of like smaller fixed width kind of situations and things like that. So without any further ado, let's just jump in and start creating this card. Okay, so here I am in CodePen. You can create a free account at codepen.io and get yourself a new pen here. And what I'm going to do is create a div element. Now I have my nice blank viewport. And I'm going to create, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to create a page wrap div. And then inside of it, I'm going to create another div, again, for the purposes of this demo. And I'm going to make it the article container. And, you know, we're not going to be doing the layout. We're just going to be designing an article card. And so how that article card is laid out on your page will depend on the context of your project. And so for this project, we're just going to create some basic layout styles just so we can prominently display our card in the middle of the screen. That way we can look at it and you know, adjust the layout as necessary and see it easily. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is for the body, I want to make sure there's no extra margin on there, so margin 0 as always. And let's get the page wrap here, and let's make sure this page wrap is our background. And so let's make it have a nice light gray background color and give it a min height of 100 viewport height. Okay, so you can see our nice background color there. Now what I want to do is for the purposes of this demo, I want the page wrap to display our article in the middle of the page so we can easily see it. So to do that, there's a really easy way to center things, and that's to display it as a flex container, and then do justify content center and align items center. And this is going to center any elements inside of it, and so we can't see it, but our article card is actually centered there. And actually we could probably, let's just add, I'm going to get rid of my JavaScript, I don't need it for this project, but let's get the article container, and let's just do a width of 50 pixels and a height of 50 pixels just so we can see it and make sure that our centering is working. And we're going to do a border 1 pixel solid red. There you go, centered in the middle of the page, and this is where we're going to create our card. And so let's go ahead and start doing that. I don't need that anymore. And what we want to do is, actually I'll come up here in my HTML first, and I'm going to create an article tag that's going to hold, this is the outer edges of the card here. And so what I want to do is give it a class. Actually, before we try to style it, we should probably give it a class like featured article. And this is going to have a background that is white in order to make it stand out from the container behind it. And let's give it a let's give it some content here so we can start styling that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a header, and inside of the header I'm going to create the featured image for the article. Now in order to do this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a figure element, just a nice semantic element to wrap our featured image in. And so I'll post to more information on the figure element below this video. Let's leave the source blank for now. We'll come back to that. We always want an alt tag for all our images. And so let's give this the featured article photo. And you probably want a better, we definitely want a better alt tag than that. It helps with search engine optimization, and also people who use screen readers want to know what's in your image. So we probably want to do something more descriptive of what's in the image, but for now that'll be a good placeholder. And this is self-closing tag. And let's go ahead and give it a class of, you know, actually I'm gonna give it the class featured image, and I'm gonna apply it directly to the image here. And I'll use a short version of the word image. And now we need a source here. We need an image. And so what I do is, if I don't actually have the content for the page yet, it's nice to actually have content before we start designing. In this case, I don't have that. And so something you can do is you can come to pixelm.photos. This is a service called Lorem Pixelm, and it's really cool. They basically host a bunch of images for you, and they generate these links where you can easily get the images. And so they generate these links, like this is the puppy dog link, and you know, it has an ID of 237. So what you do is you link to the site, and then you link to the ID, you link to the ID of the image you want, and then these are actually height and width settings right here. And I like this puppy dog image, so I'm going to use that. If you want to see what other images are available, you can click here, and you can find another image, but I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to copy this code, and I'm going to paste it into my project. And I'm going to paste it into the source here. Now, let's see. So the figure tag actually comes with default margin, and we don't want that. So I'll actually just come here under page wrap, and I'm going to grab all figure tags because I think we're going to use it a couple times. And I'm just going to say margin 0. No, thank you. Okay. So here is our card. The reason that our featured image is shaped like that is because we have the setting at 200 width and 300 height. And what I think we'll end up doing, let's try 500 pixel width and like a 350 pixel height. I like the way that looks, and I need to widen here. And I think that's going to end up being too wide for our card. And so what we want to do, and I do this on most projects, at the very top, actually right above where we do, where we styled the figure, I'm going to grab all the images on the page and say max width 100%. So no image will overflow the container that it's in. And that's important for responsive images and fluid images. And so that's a setting that I use on every project. Okay, so what we want to do is we want our article card to be no wider, for the purpose of this demo anyway, and actually I'm going to apply it to the container. I want the article card to stretch to the size, as widthwise I want it to stretch the size of the container it's in. And so for the container, I'm going to grab article container, and I'm going to set it to a max width, max width of 300 pixels. There we go. And that is going to, whatever context you're using this image in your project, that's going to depend on the size of this card. But you want to style the card. Right now, it's going to stretch to be at the size of the content that's in it. And right now, the content that's in it is an image that wants to be 500 pixels. And so you want to set your container to whatever the actual width you want it to be. And so if it's in a grid, you might have 3 cards. And so your grid is going to determine how wide that can be. And so, but the card itself is going to stretch to whatever the content inside of it will wants to push it to until it hits a container. And in this case, it's hitting our article container, which is set to a max width of 300 pixels. So that's why this is now going to be a 300 pixel card. Again, you'll want to style it to the context of the project you're working on. Okay. This featured article, let's go ahead and start adding the content into it before we do any more styling so that we can kind of see what we're doing here. Let's see, the next thing I want after, actually inside of this figure, I'm going to use, I'm going to put underneath the figure actually, I'm going to create a div, and this div is going to serve as my author profile. And so this is where all my author information is going to go into. So I want this card to have, to show an author. And so inside of here, I'm going to do a profile pic of the author. So I'm actually going to use figure again. And what we're going to do here is kind of unique. We're going to create an image with a class profile pic. And let's give it an alt attribute, Joe Smith's profile pic. And I like to, this is a trick I can teach you guys. Instead of using a single quote here, since I'm writing it in code, let's use the HTML for what a quote is. And actually you can see this ampersand RSQUO is HTML code for a apostrophe. I said quote, I meant apostrophe. And so if you look, you can see it's put a nice apostrophe there. And so that's how that works. What we want to do is, this is a self-closing tag. And this needs a source as well. And actually we'll come back to that. But right now, I want to create, inside of this figure, I'm going to create a tag called Figcaption. And this is just telling the browsers that this is going to serve as the caption to this image. And so this is an image of your author. And so this caption is going to be information about your author. And I actually want to put it inside of a small tag. So that's what we're going to do. This is an article by Joe Smith. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to use the bar here. It's right above on my keyboard anyway. It's right under the backspace button, and you have to hit shift and you can find that bar there. And I'm actually going to put that this article was written by Joe Smith and it was published 3 days ago. Now this is something that you would want to update programmatically, meaning with your server-side code, or maybe even your front-end JavaScript code. And I can do a tutorial on how to do that, but that's not what today's tutorial is about. But since we know that we're going to be updating this most likely with JavaScript or something like that, let's go ahead and put a span tag around it. Span tag is just an inline, it's kind of like an inline version of a div tag. It has no meaning to it other than it just makes a nice inline container. And I'm going to give it the class. You need to say something like, let's just do publish date. And so we now know that whoever's programming this functionality to calculate how many days ago it was published, they can select it by this publish date class. So that's why we did that. Okay, so that's like the caption to our profile image here. For the image itself, it needs a source. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to use my profile image, which is actually on my website, tylerduprey.com. You guys can use it. It's /image/profilephoto.png. If you can stand it, you can use it, I guess. And let's just put it in here for the source of the profile pic. And that's going to come in really big. So, and again, remember, all our images are maxed with 100%. So it's going to grow to the size of the image file or until it hits a container, and that's what it's done in this case. So what we want to do is say profile pic, and we want to say, I actually want to give it a fixed width of, I'm not even sure, maybe 30 pixels. Let's try 50. And it's a square image, so I didn't need to specify the height. But for the purpose, we're actually going to do some more with this, and I want to specify the height for some of the stuff that we're going to do to kind of make this image look nicer. The other thing we're going to do with this image is give it a border radius of 50%. Should turn it into a circle. Yeah, so it's like a nice circle there. And why don't we go ahead and style this image? Actually, I wasn't planning to do this right away, but let's style this image because I want to show you why we're fixing the height and width. There's ways that we can style this image, and I'll show you one. Probably the most popular way would be to add a border to it to kind of make it look nice. And so maybe do like a border of, let's say 5 pixels solid, and then let's get a color. I'm going to come to color.adobe.com. I've saved colors here. This is one of my themes. And so let's grab this blue color and let's give it that blue border. So that looks nice. I know of a technique where I can actually create a cooler border, and so I'm actually going to do that now. I still, let's see, what I want to do is delete this rule. I still want to have fixed the width here, but I want to add to this image. What I'm actually going to do, I think I'm going to use span tags. So let's add span tags on either side of this image. And what we're trying to do here, and hopefully this works, but I want to create a gradient border instead of that solid blue border. And I do this on my personal website for my profile, but you can't, there is no gradient border section when I don't think there's a way to do a gradient border with the border rule with this property there. But I think what we can do is put an element around it, and so it's going to be kind of in the background of our image. And I'm going to say class equals, let's give it like, let's just name it exactly what it is. It's going to be the border for our profile photo. So I'm going to say profile border, and right above profile pic, I want to say profile border. This is a span, so it's inline. So first of all, I want to display it as an inline block. And the reason why, I do want it to be inline so that it wraps around this image, but I want it to be a block level element as well. I want it to be an inline block because that's going to allow us to set width and height and border radius for sure. But it'll let us set width and height for sure because of this inline block. And what I want to do, instead of rewriting width 50% or 50 pixels and height 50 pixels, I actually just want to add, I'm just going to add profile border to this. And so you can't see it, but this profile border should be wrapping exactly around the outer edge of our image. And so now all we have to do, I believe, is first we're going to give it a gradient background so that we can see it. And again, I've actually used this in a project, so I'm going to take the gradient background from the project, from my website where I've actually used this. And you guys can just copy this. You have my permission. Obviously this is a tutorial, anything I do here you guys can copy. I hope that's clear. That's not how that works at all. I was too worried about how ridiculous of a statement I was making, and I wasn't thinking about what we have to do here. We have to do background image, and we need to put in linear gradient there. And so we use the background image rule here to add a linear gradient in, and I use the colors that I like. You can use whatever colors you want to use. and we can't see it because it is the exact same height and border radius as the image, and so it's basically invisible right now. So what we need to do, what I would do, is just add a padding of however large we want the border to be. And since this padding is basically serving as our border, I'm going to make a special CSS note here. There's nothing special about this, the way I'm making this note. I just want to make a note to anyone else who, or even myself later when I come back to this project, I want them to know that this is serving as the border size for the profile picture. And I'm going to say the author profile picture, because it's an unusual way to make a border. And so I just want to make sure that myself or anyone else who comes back to this project and doesn't know why we're doing this, I want them to know that this is where we're getting our border from. And so I want the border to be 5 pixels. So let's add a 5 pixel padding all around it. See how that works? We have a gradient background behind the image, and we're only showing 5 pixels of that background around the image. But what it does is it creates a really nice gradient border. Pretty cool, right? That is worth the money you paid for this tutorial right there. So I like the way that looks, all joking aside. So let's grab the caption inside of the author profile, because I actually want to create some space there. So we want to select the author profile, and we're getting the caption, which is below the profile pic. So I'll put the styles below the profile pic. And actually I need to add the class selector there. And so we're grabbing the author profile, and then I want to get the figure caption inside of that. And I want to give it a margin top of, I'm going to try 1 rem, but that might end up being too large. Yeah, because this is actually less than 1 rem because we used the small tag. So the browser is doing what we wanted it to do and making it small. And so we need to give it a margin that is small. So let me try half. Yeah, I think that looks better. Nice spacing there. Let's continue adding content in our card. I'm going to do more with this, but let's just continue adding content in our card for the sake of moving along here. All right, so I think we're done with our, actually there's one more thing I want to put in our header of the card. This is all the like what I consider to be header content for this card. And the last thing I want to do is I actually want to add a heading to the card. And in the journalism world, I went to journalism school, and we called this the lead, and we spelled it really goofy. And I'm sure there's like a history to why it's spelled L-E-D-E, and you guys can Google it. I'm not making this up. And so this is the lead of the article, and bloggers and journalists will appreciate that you as a developer know that that's what it's called and that's how it's spelled. So there you go. And so we're going to give it class lead in order to show off. And I'm going to paste lorem ipsum in it. You can go to lipsum.com, and actually let me just go back here. Lipsum.com, and then down here you can put in that you want 1 paragraph. Yeah, you want it to start with lorem ipsum, that's fine. And then they give you this dummy text here. And so I have 1 paragraph of dummy text here. And I just pasted the first few words in. And so now I have a nice article lead into my story. And let's see. Let's grab, now we want to create the, and actually, this would not be impressive to a journalist. I just realized, I just embarrassed myself. This is a headline. This is not a lead. I got mixed up as to where we were in this article card. This is a headline. Anybody who knew that is like thinking I'm an idiot. You probably turned this tutorial off by now because that was so egregious. But yeah, this is actually our headline. And so we want to give it the class headline. And then that's it for our header. Now we want to create the lead, which is the first opening, not paragraph, but really just opening line that will hopefully entice our reader to read, to know why they need to read the rest of the story, why the story is important. And so for that, I'm going to create a section outside of the header here, right under the header. I'll create a section, and I'll give it a paragraph that's going to hold our lead. Oh, that's our class. I need to get, let's give this section the class lead. Oh, geez. Now I'm all mixed up because I made such a major, as a journalist, or I should say a journalism student, that's pretty embarrassing. But this is the lead, I promise this time. And that's why we're giving it a class lead there. So let's grab the first sentence of lorem ipsum here. And it'll actually end up being, this is a short sentence, so it'll actually end up being maybe the first two. Let's try the first 3 sentences here. See how long that is. Yeah, I think that's fine. So it's a nice intro into the article, and hopefully tell the user or the reader in this case why it's important and why they should click through and read the rest of the article. And so that's the idea behind that. Okay, so the last section we want to create in our article is the footer section of our article. For those of you who aren't familiar with this HTML kind of style, by the way, I'm using article, I'm using header to describe the header. I just used a section to describe like the body or the lead of the card, and then I'm using footer to describe the content we're going to put in the footer. And I think this is just more semantic HTML. I could use a bunch of div tags, but the problem there is you have a bunch of div tags and it's hard to make out what's what because they're all div tags. And this really helps separate your code, and then your other people coming in and editing this HTML will really appreciate it because they'll be able to see what is what, and it's descriptive. Also, the browser and bots are going to be able to know they're going to be able to see that this article has a header, a main section, and a footer, and so that's good too. It certainly can't hurt. And so especially as maybe the Google bots and other bots that are calling sites, as they get better and better, doing it right the first time is going to it's never going to be the wrong thing to do. And so for our footer, I'm actually going to break it up into 2 sections. And there's no reason that these sections need to be semantic, so we can just use divs. Divs have no meaning to browsers and bots and things like that, so they're just a way to separate our code and to block 2 different block level elements. And so for the first one, I'm actually going to use the small tag again, and you'll see why here. And I want to display how many people actually clicked to view this article. So I'm going to just make up a number like 102 views. Just like before, you're probably going to want to do this programmatically, meaning with JavaScript or a server-side language, so that you're not manually updating the HTML every time this article gets a new view, right? So let's wrap this in a span tag as well. I just want to wrap the number in a span tag. And I want to give it the class feature. Let's just say views. And so each article, could have a certain amount of views that we store and save. And then when we display this article card, we can use a server-side language, or we could use even front-end JavaScript to retrieve those views and then display it here. So that's how we want to do that. And so I just made up the number 102. Who knows how many people have read this article? 0, technically. Then I want to add a button here, and I'm not going to use the button element. I'm going to use an anchor tag, because this is an article, so it most likely is going to link to the actual article where the page is. And let's just say view article. Let's use the word view again to be consistent, right? We used it up here. So view article, and let's give it a class button so that it is a button. And there we go. So actually, I think that's all the content in our page, and we can just focus on styling now. So you can see this is already starting to look like a nice little article card that you might see on a website, on like a blog page. And so now what I want to do is I want to come up to article container, and I want to separate this from the body a little bit. And this is a technique that I use a lot. Some would say too much, and I would probably agree with them. But I'm going to use a box shadow to pull that away from, I have this box shadow saved. You can pause the video and copy it or make your own box shadow. But I like the way it pulls the article. There's a little shadow there that kind of pulls it off the page so it looks like it's sitting on top of the background. And I just like the way that looks. Okay. The other thing I want to do is I want to give it a border radius. I think it'll look nice. So I'm going to give it a border radius of 10 pixels. And as you can see, nothing happened. So let me just make sure. So we have our box shadow there, so that's working. Here, let me take a look at our featured article. Oh, I added the box shadow to the article container because I thought it didn't quite look right. And so we want to add the box shadow to the featured article. Sorry about that. It's like, man, this is not working out. So yeah, and also to the featured article, we want to add the border radius. And we want to make it 10 pixels. So you can see we now have a nice soft border here that's rounded. Up here we don't, and that is because the image still has square corners on it, and it's actually overflowing that border radius. So you can't see it, but there's actually rounded borders on our container here. And the way that we can get those to actually show up is just to simply add overflow hidden to our card. And so now the image you can now no longer see that corner of the image, and it's nice and rounded just like it is down here. So that's good. The next thing that bothers me is all our content inside of here is pressed up against the left edge of the page here. And so to take care of that, I'm actually going to add a container class. And I'm going to come up here under page wrap, and I'm going to add a container class that has a margin of 0 in auto. And it has a, let's give it a width of, let's try 90% for now, and see how that works out. So what we want to do is we want to add that container class to pull in all of our content. So let's take a look here and see where we need to add those containers, because we want to make sure we're adding it in the right places. And so I think what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to add it here. I can't add it to the header because it's going to pull this image in, and I don't want there to be space on the left and right of the image. I want the header to take up the full width of the article because I like the way that looks. And so what might be the best thing to do is to create a new div. Yeah, let's try creating a new div inside the header, and let's just see how this works out. Oops. Here, we can finish creating it, but once you have the div element created, actually copy it. Well, we don't want it in that spot. We actually want it underneath the image here, like so, and I don't need the extra line. And I'm going to give it the class container, and I'm going to put everything except for the featured image inside of that. So all this author profile stuff plus the headline, which is not a lead, it is a headline. And properly indent that there. And there you go. See how all of our header information has been pulled away from the edges? It looks really nice. And I'm going to do the same thing for this content here. So let's add, we don't want to repeat ourselves too much, and so I think what I'll do here, let's just go ahead and we'll add it to two things here. We'll add it to the section. There, it pulled our content section so that it's aligned there, and then we'll add it to the footer. container is what we want to say. And so, yeah, so there we go. Now we're all aligned there. Looks really nice. Okay, I want to try something with this profile information. I don't like how much vertical space it takes up on the page. This is an article card that's going to go on a page, most likely in a grid or in a list with a bunch of other cards. And I really want it to be compact. I don't want it to take up a bunch of space on the page. And so it's a matter of putting a lot of information in a small amount of space. And you think, okay, well, how could this be any less vertical? You know, it's not, there's not a lot of places it can go up or down. Well, I want to try something here. I actually do want to try moving this up so that it's overlapping the bottom left corner of our featured image, because I actually think that'll look nice. And so let's go up and let's find this in our HTML. It is our profile, yeah, our author profile. I actually want to move the whole thing up. Now, the way we want to think about this is we want to use the CSS property called top. And we want to move the top of this author profile up. So we're actually going to use a negative top value in order to do that. In order to use the CSS property top, we actually need to explicitly set the position of this author profile. So let's do that now. Let's find author profile in our CSS. Who knows where I put it? Down here. Here, we didn't select it yet. So let's put it right above where we selected the author profile caption. Let's say author dash profile. And what we're going to do is we're going to position it relative. And it's already positioned relative by default, but we need to explicitly say that so that we can set the top value. And so the top value is, now we want this to come up so that it's about halfway overlapping this line. And we know that it's 50 pixels tall, right? So halfway would probably be about negative 25 pixels would probably move that up. And it did not work. That's funny. Oh, and I know why. So this is positioned relative. The container is here. So what we actually want to do is we want to move this container up. Let's see, we're not really using this author profile class. We can actually move, I believe, we can move this author profile class to this container div. And yeah, it's position. Oh, here we go. I spelled position wrong, so it's position relative. There we go. So it actually did move up 25 pixels. And we can get rid of this, or actually, we can get rid of this class feature. And I think this is just wrapping the author profile. So we can get rid of this div. That used to be the author profile div. Let's get rid of that. We don't need it, and we don't want extra divs in our layout. So let's take that out and then fix the spacing. Sorry about that. And so now we've moved it up, and it's starting to look better, but it needs to go further up. And so we're just going to eyeball this and say, let's see what it looks like if it's 40 pixels. Man, I like the way that looks. I hope you guys do too. I think that looks really good. Looks really dynamic. It accomplishes our goal of pulling this content up so that it creates more vertical space. You can actually see the space we've created right here. And so what we actually need to do to fix that is pull this up as well. And so what we want to do, instead of just selecting the author profile, we want to also select our lead here. So let's grab the lead and let's pull that up as well. So here's our lead, and we're going to have to pull that up as well. And so we're just about to wrap up here. So let's add some final styles. We're going to get our footer styled as well. So thanks for sticking with me this far. But we should be wrapping up here in the next 5-10 minutes. And then, so what we want to do is we want to pull our footer up as well. And I actually just realized we didn't put a footer class on there. So for the footer, let's go ahead and add, this is a featured article card. So we want to add featured footer. That's what we'll call it. We want to be descriptive in our classes so that it's clear what this is for. And so let's go ahead and also apply our featured footer here. And let's see, did that pull? Oh, and I didn't select it properly. I'm having a hard time with typos today. Sorry about that. So there you go. Now we've pulled that up, and we actually created, there wasn't very nice spacing underneath our footer, and so we actually created that 40 pixels to be nice spacing under our footer here. And so I think this looks really good. All right, so like the last thing that we need to do here is style this footer, and this is going to be really easy. And I know this video isn't a short one, so again, thank you for sticking with me here. Let's take a look at the featured footer, and let's go all the way down to the bottom of our code, and let's select that. And we want to display that as a flex box so that these are out in a row. And then we want to create space in between these two items. And so remember, each of these divs now are flex items. And so what we can do to create space between them is just say justify content and say space between. And there you go. This is laid out nicely. If we style this button and do some other styles to the footer, you'll start to, this is starting to come together here. For the footer section, I also want to do a border top, and I want to say 1 pixel solid, and I actually want to set it to be very faint, so I want to use RGBA. The A stands for alpha, which means the alpha channel, which is just a fancy term for the opacity that we can set on this element. And so what we can do is we can set this to, you know what, I'm going to use a gray. There's a gray I like, 119, 119, 119. It's actually the same gray that I use for text a lot, and that we will eventually use for text in this. And I'm going to set it to 0.35 opacity. And so there's a nice faint border there. We don't want it to be too thick. And we also don't want our content touching it. So we want to go ahead and set a padding top of 1 rem. All right, now let's style that button. So here's the button, and we're going to style it with padding 0.5 rem. We're going to set the background to my favorite color, apparently, because I use it in all these tutorials. You can set it to whatever color you want. And we're going to set the text color to white. And let's go ahead and set text decoration none to that. That's starting to come together. We've put a border radius on everything else, so I think it would look nice if we put it on this. This is a small element, so it probably only needs a 5 pixel border radius. Yep. So that looks nice. I need a little bit more padding up top there. And so what I think I'll do is set it to 0.75 rem. There we go. That's created the padding in the button. Sorry. Come up to our footer here and set that padding top to 2 rem maybe. And that generates a little bit more padding there. And so I think that looks really nice. And so now what we want to do, the text, I don't like the text color. I think that it is too strong, and I'll show you why here in a second. But for now, come up to page wrap, and let's just say all text on the page by default should be this nice gray text color. It's actually the same color we used to make this border. And this makes our text color softer. And now what we want to do is we want to set this headline. Where did we select our headline? Did we select the headline by itself? I don't think so. Here, let's select the headline, and let's make that, let's set that color to just a regular black color. So what we actually did here, and this is a nice design technique that you guys can take. What we're doing here is we're controlling the way the user views this element. And so when the user sees this element, the first thing they're probably going to notice is the big featured image, right? The next thing they're going to notice is either the article card because we put, or I'm sorry, the profile photo because we put this crazy border around it, or they're going to notice this text because it's a strong black color. It's not very gray or transparent. And then they'll notice this lead, which we made a softer color in order to control that, so that we made sure they saw this first and this first, and probably even this profile photo. If we didn't put such a crazy border around it, this profile photo probably wouldn't be as prominent. So this kind of a design would probably be for a blog where you want to feature the author very prominently. If you weren't featuring authors very prominently, maybe you don't have a photo at all. Maybe you just have this small text here, right? That shows who made it. And maybe, no matter what, you probably want to put a link to the authors, an archive of the author's posts as well. But we want to feature the author prominently, apparently, because we put this really cool border around it and this really cool styling. But like I said, we're controlling the way the user flows through this element. And even down here, we're making sure that this is small so that what we really wanted to do is click on this article card. So we have a nice bright background. The white text makes it kind of pop out so you can see it. And again, if this were larger, it would take away from the prominence of this button. And so we use the small tags to make this nice and small. And so that just gives you an idea of what we're doing here. There's only one thing left to do, and that's to put decent fonts on here. And then we really will be done. So I'm going to come here to fonts.google.com, and here, let me just go back to the home page. I really like the font Roboto, and if that's how you pronounce that, Roboto, and also Roboto Slab, which is over here. And the way this works is, let me start over because I've already practiced this, but what you want to do is we want to get this for our headline, and so we want to add it with that plus sign, and then you can come down here and you can click, and you could customize it if you want to, but we don't need all these other styles. If you want them, you can have them. The more you choose, the higher your load time is going to be, though, so try not to get too many, but definitely get the ones you need because you want it to look nice. If you need bold, you want to grab the bold style as well. We don't need that, so we're going to be okay. So yeah, we added that, and then so now I want to add Roboto because I want to add that as my paragraph text. So now I have my headline and my paragraph font, and if we come down here, we can click Embed at Import, and we can import it into our CSS style sheet by copying this, going back to CodePen. I usually go to the top of the CSS section, and then you can import it there. And so what I'm going to do is, for the page wrap, I'm going to set the font family to Roboto, and then I'll set the fallback to sans serif. So it'll be Roboto primarily, but if for some reason that doesn't load right, it'll fall back to a sans serif. And I think that looks a lot nicer. Actually, yeah, I think that looks a lot nicer. And then we'll go to the headline here. Here's our headline that we selected. I think... Yeah, okay. So here's our headline, and we want to say font family Roboto Slab. And we also want this to fall back to a sans serif as well. And actually, it's a serif font, so that's not right. Let's actually fall back to a serif then. And so there you go. We now have some nice fonts there as well, which just helps clean it up. Okay, so hopefully you guys really liked that tutorial. This is probably one of my favorites. I think I said that on the last tutorial, but I had a lot of fun with this one. We dealt with CSS positioning. We were able to create that cool profile photo with the gradient border and how it's overlapping the featured image. And I just really like the way it turned out, and I think I'm going to use it in a real world project because, like I said, I really like it. I will also do some tutorials on how to create those dynamic elements we talked about, like the one that said that this article was posted 3 days ago. I want to do a tutorial on how to update that with front-end JavaScript. and then I'll also do a tutorial on how to update that view counter. And maybe it won't work with a real view counter, but I will show you how to programmatically update that number using JavaScript. And so who knows, maybe there's a tool you can use. I build static websites usually, and these tutorials are all static. So maybe there's a tool we can use where we could even, like Google Analytics might offer something. There might be some tools we can use where we could actually use a real view count number, which would be really cool. But anyway, until next time, guys, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Keep looking out for more tutorials. You can go to my contacts page and reach out to me. I'll try to respond as soon as possible if you have suggestions or other tutorials you'd like to see. But until next time, happy coding, guys.